Hi everyone, this is Neil from Edureka and welcome to this Informatica tutorial session. So let's not waste any time and let's move forward and look at today's agenda. Now, we'll begin this session by first trying to understand what exactly does businesses need today. Then we'll move on to understand how business intelligence helps in providing what the businesses need, and then we'll be deep diving into business intelligence where we'll be talking about extract, transform and load, that is the ETL process, as well as another core concept of data warehouse. From there we'll move on to talk about Informatica PowerCenter, we'll be talking about the architecture of Informatica PowerCenter, and then we'll be looking at the various Informatica PowerCenter client tools. Finally, to complete the business intelligence cycle, we'll also be talking about data visualization. So are you guys clear with today's agenda? Can you give me a quick confirmation? Alright, so I've got a confirmation from everyone. Let's move forward into the first topic of the day, that is, what do businesses need today? Now, before we actually move ahead, let me ask you all the same question. What do you feel that a business should need today? Okay, so Gauri is telling me more revenue, definitely. Santosh is telling growth. Santosh, in terms of growth, what exactly are you referring to? Do you mean organizational growth or growth in terms of revenue, growth in terms of its strength? Okay, all of that. That's great. So to summarize everything, growth is the perfect answer to it. Every business today needs to grow. But how exactly do they do that? To achieve growth, every business needs to have an insight as to how the organization is doing as an individual as well as how it is performing in the market as such. But to understand all this, it needs to gather data from different sources. This could be data from social trends, this could be data from inside the organization, it could be market research, it could be customer feedback. So you have different sources from where you can get this data. Once you have this data, by performing various kinds of analysis, you can get a great business insight, which in turn can give you a guiding path which will lead to your business growth. So to answer the question, every business today needs to grow. But there comes the question on who needs these insights or who exactly are the right people for these insights. Any answers to this? Okay, Henry says manager, Kripa says top level professionals. Definitely, that is correct. Now, talking about professionals who need these insights, there are mainly two categories of professionals. Business executives, that are top level professionals, and business analysts. Business analysts are usually the people who work around with this data to gather all this insights, who then go on to provide this information to the business executives. Once the business executives have an idea with respect to what exactly is needed to be done, they sit down for a brainstorming session to work around with different possibilities and come with various possible business ideas which can lead to business growth. So are you guys clear till here? Can you give me a quick confirmation? Okay, Santosh has given me a confirmation, so has Henry, Dave, Kripa, Gauri. That's great to see. I've got a confirmation from all of you guys. So moving forward, let's try to understand what exactly is the problem in achieving these insights. One of the major problems most analysts face is that the data that is being gathered from these different sources cannot be directly visualized. Can anyone tell me why do we need to visualize this analytical or this insight? That's perfectly correct, Kripa. Visualization is the best means to help anyone understand what exactly these insights are. So let's take it this way. If I show you the sales number in an Excel format and at the same time I'll visualize it in form of a line graph or a histogram, which would you understand better? Definitely the histogram or the line graph. So our eye processes the visuals more faster than they go with numbers. Okay, so that's exactly why data visualization plays a very important role in today's industry and is one of the most growing trend and technology in today's world. So the key problem being here is I can gather my data from all the sources, but I cannot directly go ahead and visualize this. Nor can I directly integrate this data because they could be coming from different sources. You could be using an Oracle database to store your data. It could be a Microsoft SQL server. You could also be taking the unstructured data from social media as well. So combining all this data to analyze and get an insight becomes highly improbable. Although there are tools which help you gather data from different sources and directly visualize it like Tableau, but again, it's quite limited in that aspect as well, because the amount of analysis as well as the amount of integration there is quite limited. So are you guys clear with respect to the problems that people face while achieving these insights? Okay, that's good enough. Now, there's always a problem. So what is a solution going to be to this? So now we have a problem at hand. Now comes the question on how we can solve this. Now there are various ways that you can come across to try and solve this problem. But the most preferred and the most trusted solution in the industry presently is business intelligence, which tends to be the perfect solution to all your problems in achieving insights. Now, business intelligence basically is a combination of various techniques as well as tools which help you gather the data from different sources and then help you to combine this data and store it into a data warehouse. Once you store this data into a data warehouse, then you can perform your various analytical process which can then be taken forward to visualization, which will make it easier for the business users or the business executives to understand these insights. But again, how do I combine the data from different sources and then go ahead and keep it in the data warehouse? That's where the process of ETL comes into picture. Now, what do I mean by ETL? ETL stands for Extract, Transform and Load. ETL is one of the most popular technique in the industry presently to achieve data integration and help you combine your data from different sources and store it into a data warehouse. Okay, so Kripa has a question here. Kripa is asking me, is ETL the only way through which we can achieve business intelligence? No, Kripa. Okay, to give you a better understanding with respect to this, Kripa, ETL actually is a process under the stage of data integration in business intelligence. Now, what do I mean by data integration? It is a way through which you're combining your data from different sources and then going on to store this data into different warehouses or cubes as per your requirements. Now, to achieve data integration, there are again different ways. You can go with data modeling, you can go with data warehousing, data cleansing, data profiling, and then you have ETL or ELT process. Among all this, ETL is the most preferred and the most effective processes, and that's exactly why most organizations today follow with ETL process. Now, talking about what exactly is the ETL process, there are mainly three phases, that is extract, transform and load. Now, your first phase, that is extract, mainly comprises of two parts where you have capture, which gives you a sample idea of what data is present in your source system, and then you have scrub. Scrub basically is a process in which you're going to check your data for any inconsistencies or any invalid input with respect to that same. This is done using various AI techniques to help you understand if there's some data that you can correct and take it forward, or if the complete row has to be rejected. Once you have completely accepted all the data present in your source system, then you go on to perform the operation of transformation. Now, what exactly is a transformation? Transformation is quite simply put, a set of rules that you define which help you convert the data to a required format. Now, let's say I have 50 lakh rows present in my source system. Now, for my analysis purpose, I don't need all 50 lakh rows. I just need 5,000 rows which meet a certain condition. So what am I going to do? I'm going to write these set of rules which will help me transform the source data and give me only the required data. Once I have this required data, I'll go ahead to load it and index it into my data warehouse. So are you guys clear with respect to the ETL process and why we're using it in this scenario of business intelligence? Okay, so Dave has asked me, how is ETL different from ELT? Okay, that's a very good question, Dave. To those of you who are not aware of what ELT is quite similar to ETL, but where instead of you perform extract, transform and load, what you'll be doing is you'll extract the data, load it into a data warehouse and then be performing the transformation operations there. But in terms of performance, now let's take a real-time scenario. Let's say the same number, I have 50 lakh rows and then I'm directly loading into my data warehouse. Firstly, my data warehouse needs to be that huge, and then in that 50 lakh rows, I just need 50,000. So once I have loaded these 50 lakh rows, I need to perform the transformation operation to just segregate the 5,000 rows that I want. So just because I need that 5,000 rows, I need to ensure that my data warehouse can store 50 lakh rows. So you see the problem here, right? It's the problem with respect to the memory required there. Now, most enterprise data warehouses do occupy a huge memory, but again, on a real-time scenario with respect to your performance, don't you feel that it is a downgrade? That's great. So I'm glad to see that all of you are agreeing with respect to this. So does that answer your question, Dave? Great. Again, so one thing I want to put across right away is that at any point, if any concept or any topic that I'm explaining is not clear to you, please make sure you put across your query in the chat box so that I can clarify. I have no problem if I have to explain a certain concept 5 times or 10 times, but I want to ensure that all of you are quite clear with respect to what we're discussing. Because this is quite important for you to understand before we actually move into Informatica PowerCenter 2. Now, don't worry, we'll be seeing extensive demos as part of today's session. So I request you to be a bit patient with respect to that thing. So again, even while we're discussing demo, there may be certain things that you may not be clear on. So don't worry, please put across your questions at that point so I can help you clarify it. Is that clear? All right, great. So I've got a confirmation from everyone. So moving forward, let's talk about the important concept here about data warehouse. Now we've talked about how you're taking data from different sources and then storing into a data warehouse all the way from the start of the session. But what exactly is a data warehouse? I was expecting at least one of you to ask me this question. So does anyone want to give a try? Okay, Santosh says data warehouse is used to store data from different sources. That's good, Santosh, but let me ask you this. How is a data warehouse different from your normal database? Now, this is not just a question to Santosh, this is to all of you. Think for a moment and then let me know. If you don't know the answer, don't worry, I will be explaining that as well. Okay, so Deepti's got it almost close. So let me answer this question in a way that everyone can understand. The main difference between a data warehouse and a database can be based on two factors. First is their usage and the second is their architecture. Now coming to their usage, a data warehouse is mainly used for analytical purpose. Now it's something that is created with the main objective of performing various analysis in the data that is being stored there. Whereas a database is mainly used to store data, thereby giving you the second difference that your database mainly focuses on writing data to it, whereas your data warehouse mainly focuses on reading data from it. So your architecture as well are quite different. Thereby their difference in architecture also comes into picture. A data warehouse is created in such a way that the reading and the analytical process performed on it is quite faster as compared to a database. But a database in terms of writing data into it may or may not be quite faster than a data warehouse. So it again depends on what kind of database you're using. So I hope you guys are clear with respect to the difference between both. Okay, that's great to see. Now, going by the definition of Barry Devlin, a data warehouse is a simple, complete and consistent store of data obtained from different sources made available to end users in a way they can understand as well as use in business context. So here you're extracting data from different sources, then you're making it available to end users such that you can understand and use it in business context. That is, it becomes easy for an analyst to understand this data as well as perform various different analytics to this data. Now comes the question as to what a data warehouse is being used. There are mainly three purposes as to which a data warehouse is going to be used. First comes your information processing, your analytical processing, as well as data mining. Now let's deep dive into each one of these. Talking about information processing data warehouse, these are mainly used for basic query. Apart from that, they're also used for basic statistical analytics and reporting using crosstabs, tables, charts, infographics, and more around the information presentation layer. So they're again quite straightforward. Then when you come down to talking about the analytical processing data warehouse, this revolves around mainly your OLAP operations like your slice and dice, drill up, drill down, and pivoting with a summary table as such. Finally, we have data mining process. Now, this process mainly revolves around finding hidden patterns and associations in your data, constructing various analytical models, as well as performing classifications and prediction of your data. Now, once you've performed these operations, these can again directly be taken ahead to visualize. So are you guys clear with respect to the types of data warehouse and what exactly is a data warehouse? Okay, so Dave has a question here. Dave is asking me, do we have to select one of these three options while creating a data warehouse? No, Dave. These three data warehouses may seem similar, but how they are created slightly varies. A data warehouse that you would be creating for information process and a data warehouse that you would be creating for data mining would be completely different because again their purposes are different. So the data that you're going to be storing in them, how you're exactly storing the data within them, they all quite differ. So I hope you get the idea here. Now don't worry, we'll be extensively talking about data warehouse, how we'll be creating a data warehouse and all that in our next session. So in case if you're not clear with this, then definitely we'll talk about this extensively in our next session. And at that point, if you have any doubts, we'll take it up that time. Does that sound good, Dave? But I hope you have a simple understanding with respect to what a data warehouse is and how it plays an important role here. Okay, that's great. Now comes a question as to why use Informatica. Again, there are different tools that help you achieve data integration, and you also have different tools which help you perform ETL operations. Among all that, you must be wondering why use Informatica PowerCenter. The answer is quite straightforward. Informatica is the market's leading end-to-end data solution provider. Now, in terms of market strength, Informatica holds control over 70% of the market and is growing every day. To even look at a competitor, you may have to consider maybe IBM's DataStage or Ab initio. But again, what you need to understand is that when Informatica is holding 70% of that market, how much do you think these other tools would get a hold on? The main reason here is mainly because of the complete product lifecycle that is being provided by Informatica PowerCenter. Let's say you want to maintain the quality of your data throughout your process. So you have Informatica's data quality, which is also referred as IDQ. Or let's say you want to work with cloud and integrate your data on the cloud. So there you have Informatica's data cloud integrator. Let's say you're working on an application development as well. There again you have Informatica's lifecycle management tool which helps you completely through that. Or let's say you want to integrate your data between different organizations. So that's a huge amount of data that you're integrating. For that you have Informatica's enterprise data integrator. Or let's say you want to exchange data. You have Informatica's B2B data exchange. Apart from that, another very popular tool in the market today from Informatica is Informatica's master data management. So this again is one of the most popular tools from Informatica after Informatica PowerCenter and is quite rapidly growing at the moment. So again, Informatica is something that is always keeping up with the market. Now again, if you talk about cloud storage, which is one of the most hotcakes in the market at present, Informatica is also making its presence felt there. And it's also gone on to form a tie-up with Salesforce, and Salesforce has also gone on to invest a few billions on Informatica just a few years back as well. So again, Informatica is the leader in the market where data is being dealt with. But that exactly shouldn't be why you need to go with Informatica PowerCenter. Let's talk about what exactly is Informatica PowerCenter and its key features. This will help you understand why Informatica PowerCenter is being the market leader and is dominating the present market. Now, Informatica PowerCenter is not just used to perform data integration, but also helps you migrating your data from different databases to a newer databases as well. Apart from that, let's say you want to integrate your application data, then you can do that as well using Informatica PowerCenter. Or the major topic that we have been discussing, that is the creation of a data warehouse, Informatica can do that without a problem. So if you look at the example here, you're taking data from an Oracle database, you're taking data from SAP HANA, your Microsoft SQL Server, as well as different databases. All that can be combined and stored into a single data warehouse using Informatica PowerCenter. And later on in this session, you'll be seeing how easy it is to do all this. So I hope you guys are clear with respect to why go with Informatica and why Informatica PowerCenter is the market lead. So any doubts with respect to that same, or you guys are not convinced as to why Informatica is so good? Okay, that's great to see. Moving forward, let's look at some of the domains where Informatica has helped solve various problems. Now, let's talk about the banking domain. Now, we all know the amount of data that is being processed on a daily basis in a bank. And after demonetization, statisticians tell us the growth has been close to 180%. Now, that's a huge growth with respect to transactional data. Now, all this data needs to be verified, and you also need to centralize this data because we go with core banking facilities these days. That's where Informatica PowerCenter comes into picture and helps you do all this without a problem and makes it quite easy. Now let's look at the insurance domain. Now here one of the major challenges is validating the claims and information from the customers, as well as you need to migrate the data in case of a merger or an acquisition. Now this is quite common with respect to the insurance domain. As well as when you look at publication domain as well, there also you need to migrate your data between different industries when there's a takeover or there's a process of migration happening as well. Now all these domain problems can be solved very easily using Informatica PowerCenter. Now how that happens we'll be seeing in the upcoming slides. Now to help you understand how Informatica PowerCenter works, let's look at 5 different use cases. Now let's say you're a retail organization and you have different sets of data. You have 1,000 customer details, you have about 3,000 products and 50,000 transaction details. From this, we are mainly going to try to achieve 5 different insights. First is mainly to identify your most loyal customers so that you can go on to provide them with additional discounts. Now, this is something that most organizations do to improve their customer relationship. After that, let's try to identify the regions which require more marketing. That is, regions where we are having least sales. Once we have identified this, we can try out different marketing schemes to improve our hold in these regions. Now, the third problem is to identify customers who've made low number of purchases from our organization. Once we've identified this, we can try to offer them a special discount to increase their chances of coming back to our organization and increasing our sales. Now, the fourth problem that we'll be talking about is to identify our most selling product and its corresponding category. Once we have identified this, then we can focus morely around this and then improve the quality of products that are provided in this category. Finally, what we'll be trying to understand is the requirement of the customers region-wise so that we can provide better discounts, better marketing strategies across each region. So are you guys clear with respect to the problem statement? Okay, that's great. Now, this is a representation of how our data is going to be processed. Now, we have the details of the customer in a flat file, the product details in a CSV file, and the transaction details in our database. All these details is going to be taken and loaded into our Informatica PowerCenter, from which we'll be processing the data, transforming it, and then finally going to store it into a sales data warehouse. Once we've done this, then we can go on to visualize this data. So are you guys clear with respect to the process? Okay. Now the solution again can be broken down to 4 stages, mainly around the Informatica PowerCenter client tools. The first tool we'll be using is Informatica PowerCenter Designer. Now, Informatica PowerCenter Designer is used to load the data from all their sources, cleanse this data, and then define a mapping. Now, what exactly is a mapping? Mapping basically is the flow of the data from the source to the target definition through various transformations. So this is basically a connected design that you'll be creating. Then comes our workflow manager. Now, in workflow manager, what we'll be doing is that we'll be creating a workflow and then we'll go on to execute it. Now, a mapping in itself is not directly executable. So the transfer of data does not happen. To do that, what we need to do is we need to create a workflow to which we'll associate a corresponding mapping. Once we've done that, when we execute the workflow, we can monitor its progress using the Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Monitor. There we can see the number of data present in the source, the number of data that is being processed, the speed at which this data is being processed, as well as the amount of data that is going to be stored into our data warehouse. Finally, once we have this data, we'll go on to visualize this data. So are you guys clear with respect to the solution to this problem and how we're going to use each of Informatica PowerCenter's tool to achieve this? Okay, so I've got a confirmation from Henry, Gauri, Santosh, Krupa, Dave, Deepthi. That's great to see. So let's talk about the first tool, that is Informatica PowerCenter Designer. So as we've talked, Informatica PowerCenter Designer is mainly used to load the source metadata, create different mappings, and then go on to also create target metadata or load an existing target metadata. Okay, so Kripa has asked me why metadata. Okay, Kripa, mainly we work around metadata because it gives us a better understanding as to what a data is present in the database. Rather than using a schema, the metadata will give us a better insight with respect to both. Now, In this process of transferring the data from the source to the destination, we'll be using various transformations to process the data into a format that we choose to. So let's move forward and look at Informatica PowerCenter Designer. But before we look at Informatica PowerCenter Designer, we're looking at a tool that is called Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager. So let me go ahead and show you Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager first. So let me launch Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager. So once you've installed Informatica on your system, inside the Informatica folder you can find all the client tools here, and the first tool we will be exploring is Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager. Now again, you might be wondering why we're discussing about Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager first. This is mainly to help you understand how all the files that you'll be creating would be stored and organized as such. Now again, repository is the place where all the projects that you're working on would be stored on. In an organization, usually you have multiple repositories because different teams will be working on different projects as such. So in that case, you would be having different clients as well. So to make it easier for management, you work with different repositories, and to configure as well as work around with all the repositories, you use the Informatica PowerCenter Repository Manager. So I have already configured a repository. Let me just connect to it and show you. So once you click on the connect option here after selecting a repository, it asks you for your username and password. Once you've specified that, just click on connect to connect to your repository. So here are my different work folders. Now I'll just give you a simple example. Now let's see at Edureka transformations. So here all the sources that I have used would be stored. Now again, once you open this, you can see the sources. So these are the different sources that I had used in this project. Similarly, the targets that I had defined, the mappings, as well as the workflows. Now don't worry if you're not clear with respect to what a mapping is and what a workflow is. We'll be seeing them practically, and I'm quite sure you'll be clear then. But even if you're not clear at that point, please make sure you put across your questions and I'll be able to clarify it then and there itself. So are you guys clear till here? So what we'll be doing is we'll be creating a new work folder. Okay, so Gauri is asking me, in case of source, does the complete source get stored? No, Gauri. So here again, an object is created. So everything that you see here are basically objects, be it your source, be it your target definition, and these objects in turn are metadata representation of your source data. So not the complete source would be stored, only an object would be stored which has the metadata information of the source that you're working with. Same with targets as well as mappings. Does that answer your question, Gauri? Alright, so to create a new work folder, just go to Folders tab and select Create option. So let me just name this Informatica tutorial. And one thing you need to remember is while naming anything, be it work folder, be it your mappings, be it your target definitions, do not make use of white spaces. Always use underscore instead of white spaces. This is mainly because Informatica doesn't support white spaces in its naming convention. So there are certain naming conventions that we'll be following. I'll be explaining them as part of the session. Okay, so once you've specified this, you don't need to change anything else. Just click on OK and our work folder gets created. So if you actually see the work folder right now, there's no details present here. So what we need to do is we need to go and start filling it up. So the first client tool that we'll be exploring is Informatica PowerCenter Designer. Now, when we talk about client tools, there are mainly three client tools: PowerCenter Designer, PowerCenter Workflow Manager, and PowerCenter Workflow Monitor. Each has its own purpose that we have discussed as part of the solution phase. So the first phase that we'll be solving is in using Informatica PowerCenter Designer. So just click on the D icon present here and automatically Informatica PowerCenter Designer is launched. So this is what your Informatica PowerCenter Designer looks like. So here again you have all your work folders. So this is your workspace. There are mainly 5 different workspaces. We'll be talking about that a little ahead. And this is basically your output console window. So any operation that you perform, corresponding output would be generated here. And we'll be also talking about a special feature of Informatica that always comes into handy while you're working with mappings. Now, coming back to the workspaces, you mainly have 5 workspaces. You have your source analyzer workspace. This workspace is mainly used to load your sources as well as modify or create new sources as well. So if you want to modify any details with respect to your source data, then you can do that in this workspace. Second comes your target designer workspace. This workspace, as the name suggests, is used to either create a target definition or you can load or modify a target definition here. So any changes with respect to your target definition can be done here. Okay, Kripa has asked me what do I mean by a target definition. Kripa, by target definition I basically mean the structure of how my target data should be stored. Now let's say your source data has about 20 columns and in your target data you just need 3 columns. So what I can do is I can define a target that consists of only 3 columns. So that modification can be done in this target designer workspace. Does that answer your question, Kripa? Okay. Now the third workspace that we'll be talking about is the mapping designer workspace. Now this is a very important workspace where we'll be designing our mappings, which again consists of our source definition, our target definitions, as well as various transformations. Now apart from this, you have the Maplet designer workspace and the transformation developer workspace. About these two workspaces we'll be talking a bit later in the session. So for now, let's go back to our source analyzer workspace and let's begin by importing our source. Now before that, do any of you actually remember what our first use case problem was? Okay, so in case if you don't, the first use case problem that we had to solve was to identify the most loyal customers so that we can provide them with additional discount. Now again, if you look at the numbers here, we have 10,000 customers. Now how do you identify the most loyal customers? Any suggestion, guys? Okay, so Deepthi tells me people who have purchased most products. Definitely, that's correct, Deepthi. So to identify customers who've bought a lot of products from us, we actually need to set a benchmark. That is the minimum number of amounts they need to buy to be considered a loyal customers. So in our case, what we'll be doing is we'll consider customers who've purchased more than 10 products from our organization to be loyal customers. Now, this is a number that I have just assumed. As per your requirement, you can change it accordingly. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to identify the most loyal customers and then provide them with additional discounts. Now, we mainly have 3 sources here. We have customer details, we have product details, and we have transaction details. Who can tell me which data sets we need to use? Do we need to use all 3 of them? Okay, Gauri says all 3, so does Santosh. Dave says only customer details. Henry and Kripa say customer and transaction. So I see a lot of confusion between you people. So let me clarify this out. So let me clarify it for you all. Let me show you how these tables look like. That way you'll get a better understanding with respect to what is present where. So first is my transaction table that is present in my database. Here I'm using an Oracle database to store all my data, and you can configure any database of your choice, but this needs to be configured while you're installing Informatica PowerCenter. So let me connect here. So this is my Oracle SQL developer, and here I have different databases. So my source transaction detail is present in my Oracle HR_SRC database, and if you go inside tables, here you can find transactions. So let me show you the data present inside this. So this is the schema of the table present in the database. So you have invoice number, stock code, description of the product, the quantity, invoice date, unit price, customer ID and product ID. So do you think we need to include the transaction table as part of our input? Yes, we need to. Now apart from the transaction table, which do you feel should be imported apart from product and customer details? Definitely customer details itself. So we need to use customer details which is present in a flat file and the transaction details which is present in our database and identify the most loyal customers who've purchased more than 10 products from our organization. Now let's go back to our Informatica PowerCenter Designer. So here let's begin by loading the sources. To load any source, make sure you're in the source analyzer workspace and you have a tab here called sources. Click on it and you have option import from database and import from file. So first let me import from database. So here you need to select the ODBC connection object. So for each database you need to create a corresponding ODBC connection object. Now how do we do that? We'll be discussing as part of our next session. But for now all you need to understand is that you need to use a corresponding object to connect to each database. Now my username is HR and once I click on connect, you can see it has connected to my database. Now here from tables, I need transaction table. So I select that and click on OK. So here you can see the transaction table has been included as part of my sources. Now apart from this, I also need my customer details. Now it's time to load the customer details from a flat file. So for that, click on import from file. So now my customer file is actually present in the default directory where Informatica looks for source files. Now where is that? In my PC, go to the drive where you have installed Informatica. Inside Informatica folder, go into the version. Now I'm using 9.6.1 and the latest version presently is Informatica 10. So there's not much difference with respect to both. There are certain differences with respect to UI and certain new features which we will also see in the next session where we'll be working with Informatica PowerCenter 10. So just go inside the folder and here go into the server folder. Inside this, go inside info_shared and here inside src files. So this is the default directory where Informatica checks for source files. So here just change the file type to all files and you have your different tables. So I want my customer table which is in a flat file format, so just select it and you have a flat file import wizard. Now this basically is an import wizard which makes it quite easy for you to import your data from a flat file. Now first what you need to do is you need to check what kind of flat file it is, whether it's a delimited file or a fixed width. Now mine is a delimited file which is a comma separated file, and the second thing you need to check up in the first step is that you need to import the field names from the first line. Now the main objective of this is that Informatica actually samples your data and then creates a metadata. If the first field is not imported as field names, then what happens is the sample data that Informatica checks from the file turns out to be incorrect because your first row may actually contain field names which could be of variable type. But when you come down to the actual data that is present in each of these columns, they could be numerical values. So it actually messes it up. So always make sure if your first row contains field names, you click on this option, import field names from first line. Are we clearly here? Any doubts with respect to how to import a file from a database and a flat file? Okay, so I've got a confirmation from everyone. Good to see that you guys are following. So just click on next. Now here again, when you say delimited file, you can specify what kind of delimited file it is, and if you're using text qualifiers, what kind of codes the text qualifier is specified in. Just click on next and you have a sample data present here. Let's say you want to make any modifications with respect to the data type of a column. Then you can modify it here itself while you're importing the data. So again, you can see a sample data of your data file here where roughly about 500 rows have been imported from your actual customer details of 10,000 rows. So once you've done with this, just click on finish to complete the import. So here you have your customer details as well as you have your transaction details. Now it's time we go on to create a mapping which will help us identify the most loyal customers. So for that, let's go to the Mapping Designer workspace and let's begin by creating a new mapping. Now to create a new mapping, just click on the Mapping tab and select Create option here. Now what you need to do is that you need to name your mapping. Now again, coming back to what I had mentioned earlier, by convention all mapping should start with a small m followed by name of mapping. So here it's most loyal customers, and again no usage of white space. So once you click on OK, a new mapping has been created. So again, these are the different transformations that you can use as part of your mapping. So we'll be getting into that. So as soon as you create a new mapping itself, the transformations get unlocked as well as the mapping is available here. So you can see my present mapping is m_most loyal customers. Are you guys clearly here? Any doubts? Okay, that's great. Now what we need to do is that we need to import our sources. So select your customer details, bring it onto the workspace, just drag and drop it. Similarly, do it for your transaction table as well. Now you may see along with the source definition, there's another tab that has been associated with it. So this is basically your source qualifier transformation. Now source qualifier transformation is one of the most basic transformations you will be seeing in Informatica while you're working with relational tables or flat files. Now the main purpose of a source qualifier transformation is to help convert the various data types to Informatica supported data types. So it is one of the most important and basic transformations in Informatica. So now that we have our sources, it's time we go ahead and create our mapping. So first what we need to do is that we need to identify the customers who have purchased more than 10 products from our website. So now what we'll be doing is we'll be creating our first transformation, that is the aggregator transformation. Now to create any transformation, you can go to the transformation tab, select here, go to create option, and then you have option of selecting multiple transformations here which meet your requirements. So you can select any one of them. I definitely recommend that you explore each one of them, try around playing with them, and you'll get a good idea with respect to that same. So again, aggregator transformation is what we'll be using. So the naming convention usually follows, that is name of the transformation and then the purpose for it. So here what I need to do is that I need to process my transaction. So I'll call it process trans, and then once you click on create, you can see the transformation is created. Once you're done, now what you need to do is you need to connect your aggregator transformation to the source qualifier of transaction. This is mainly to create a connectivity for the data to flow from the source definition to the transformation. Now what you need to do is just right click on the source qualifier transformation, select all. From here you can drag it and drop it to the aggregator transformation. This will ensure there is a copy of each column present in source qualifier transformation created in the aggregator transformation, and they are correspondingly linked as well. So if you look at both the transformations, let me just expand this. I have invoice number that is also present in my aggregator transformation, and they are connected correctly. Similarly for stock code, description, quantity, invoice date, unit price, customer ID and product ID. So everything that is present in my source qualifier transformation is being transferred to my aggregator transformation. Now in my aggregator transformation, I need to perform the logic which will help me identify the most loyal customers. So to modify any transformation, first thing you need to do is just double click on the transformation, and automatically this window, that is the edit transformation window, will pop up. Now here you have the name of the transformation as well as the type of the transformation. Now this is an aggregator transformation, and you see a window here that is make reusable. Now we'll not be discussing about this right away, but I'll be telling you what exactly this option plays a role in the next example. So let's go to the ports tab. Now here I have all the available ports in my aggregator transformation. Now what do I need to do is that I need to group all this data based on the customer ID. That is, the details of a single customer would be grouped correspondingly with respect to all that data. So you'll have the details of all the transactions performed by a single customer as a group. So to group any data, you have the group by option. Now apart from this, what I need is that I need to have a count of the total number of transactions performed by each customer. Now to do that, what you need to do is that you need to create a new port which will actually count the total number of transactions. So what you need to do is click on this option here, that is add a new port, and then let's call it, let me just rename this, let me call it count. Now we have added a new port of count, and we need to change its data type. Now by default it's been assigned string, so we need to make it decimal, because this is going to store a numerical value, that is the count of number of times a transaction made by each customer. Now coming to the next part, here you can see there are three columns, I, O and V. The first is basically input port, output port and variables. Now if a port has input port checked, that means that the values for this port is being received as input. If it has output port option checked, that means that this value has to be provided as the output. Now coming back to our count, we know that the value for count is not something that is received. This is a value we need to compute. So you need to uncheck this, and immediately when you uncheck this, you can see here the expression option for count gets unlocked. Now what exactly does this mean is that the value for this column is something that needs to be computed using a specific formula, and this formula is something that you are going to specify. Now to specify the formula, just click on the expression option here and you find this arrow. Once you click on it, the expression editor opens up. Now to give you a simple understanding of the expression editor, There are several functions that you can perform as part of the aggregator transformation. Now, to just give you a simple idea, these are the complete list of functions that you can perform. Now, apart from this, let's say your function is something that includes a value that is being fed as input to your aggregator transformation. In that case, if you go to the ports tab, you can find all the input ports available to your aggregator transformation. Finally, you have variables. Now, variables, basically you have three kinds. You have either built-in variables, mapping variables, or mapping parameters. So for now, let's not look at this. Let's come back to our ports. Now, who can tell me the expression based on which I can identify the total number of transactions made by my customer? Can anyone guess it? That's right, Dave. I need to count the customer ID. So what you need to do is that the formula for counting is count itself. Now you need to pass the parameter, which is customer ID. So you can just double click here and it gets added here. Close the parenthesis, and one important feature that Informatica provides you is that it lets you validate your formula or your expression that you have defined to check if it's correct or not. Let's say there's certain formula that you're writing, but you're not sure if it gives you the right value or if the syntax is correct. In that case, you can always use the option of validate. This checks if the expression is correct and if it can be computed. Now in our case, it's correct, so click on OK and click on OK. So are you guys clear to here as to how we are grouping the details based on the customer ID and how we are counting the number of customers to identify the total number of transactions made by the customer? Any doubts still here with respect to the aggregator transformation as well? Alright, it's great to see that you guys have followed. Now, what do I need to do is that I need to identify the most loyal customers. So does it make sense to have the details of the invoice, the stock code, the description in my further processes? No, right? So I don't need any of these. So let me just unselect this. I don't need description, quantity, invoice date, unit price, but I need the customer ID. I don't need the product ID. And finally, I need the customer count as well. So once you're done with this, just click on apply and click on OK. So till here, what have I done is that I have grouped the details of transaction based on my customer, and then I have put a count that helps me identify the total number of transactions made by each customer. But again, to identify your most loyal customers, what you need to do is that you need to check if they have made more than 10 transactions. Now, how do you do that? Is that you create a new transformation called filter transformation. Again, if you remember, to create a transformation, go to the transformation tab and select create. So here we need to create a filter, FLTR, most loyal customer. Once you click on create, the transformation gets created. Now here I just need the customer ID and the count. So once you've selected both of them, just drag it and drop it to your filter transformation. So till here I have identified the number of transactions made by a customer. Now what I need to do is that I need to filter out the details of customers who have made more than 10 transactions. So to do that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to specify a condition in the filter transformation. Double click on the filter transformation, go to properties, and here you find the filter condition. So this needs to be modified. So remove true, and what we need to do is that specify the value of count has to be greater than 10, or let's say it has to be greater than equal to 10. That is, if they have made 10 transactions or more, let's consider them to be a loyal customer. So here you have the various operators present as well as a numeric keyboard to help you make the operation easier. So again, you can validate this. Expression has passed successfully. That means it's correct. So click on OK. And now we have filtered out the details of customers who have purchased more than 10 products from our website. So is this complete? So can we go ahead and load these details to our data warehouse? No, we can't. We still need the details of the customers because we only have the customer ID. So what we need to do is that we need to extract the details of the customers from the customer table. So click on apply, and we need to join this data with our customer details. So we've already loaded our customer table here. Just select this, To join the data from the filter transformation to the details of the customers through the source qualified transformation, we'll use our fourth transformation today, that is a joiner transformation. Now, the joiner transformation is a very useful transformation. It helps you join the data from two sources. A source could be a transformation or your actual source as well. You can join the details as long as there's at least one matching column present between both of them. If you have that, based on that matching column, the details would be present. Now, we need all the details of the customers present here. So select all, you can drag it and drop it to your joiner transformation. Similarly, I need these two details from my filter transformation. Select all, drag it and drop it here. Now, what do I need to do is that inside my joiner transformation, I need to specify the condition. So once you click on condition tab, you can always add the condition. So you can see here customer ID from my filter transformation should be equal to the customer ID present in my customer table. Once you've done that, it's quite simple. Click on apply. So once you've done that, it's quite simple. Just click on apply and the customer details has been added. Click on OK. So now we are joining the details of the customer who have purchased more than 10 items from our retail organization. Finally, what do we need to do is that we need to go ahead and store it into our target data warehouse. Now before that, we need to actually create a target definition that meets our requirement. So there are mainly two ways you can create a target definition. You can either create it from scratch as per your requirement, or what you can do is that you can model your target definition similar to a transformation. To create a target definition quite similar to any transformation, just right click on the transformation and go to the option create and add target. This will actually create a target definition that meets your target requirement, that is similar to your transformation. So any doubts still here? Okay, it's great to see that you guys are following. Now, before I go ahead and connect this target definition, I need to make certain changes with respect to that same. So to do that, let's go to the target designer workspace. Once you click here, you need to just load the target definition that we have just created. So this can be found inside the target folder in your work folder. So just drag it and drop it to the workspace, double click on it and you can modify it. So again, there's a naming convention that you need to follow for target definitions as well. So begin by renaming it. Let me call it TGT, most loyal customers, and click on OK. Now, since my output table is going to be stored into a database, the database type is Oracle. But let's say it's going to be stored into a different database. You have multiple options present here. You can choose one that meets your requirement. Once you click on apply, we are done. So before we actually go on to complete the mapping, there is one important thing that you need to create. Now you need to create a target table in your database which can store this data from the source. Now to do that, go to target option and click on generate execute SQL option. Here what you need to do is that first you need to connect your target database. So I'm going to store it in my Oracle HR_TGT. So here again I need to specify the username and password. So it is HR_TGT. And you can connect to your database. Once that's done, click on create table option and click on generate and execute option here. So in your output window, you can see the option where the create table SQL is being executed and has been successfully executed. So to validate this, you can go to your SQL database, you can reconnect, and in your tables you can find the most loyal customers present. So a table has been created to store this data. Now before we go ahead and complete our mapping, one last thing we need to do is that inside our target table we need to remove the duplication with respect to the customer ID. So just select this and click on remove option and that column gets removed. So click on apply and OK, and let's go back to our mapping designer, drag and drop the updated target definition and let's connect it. So select all and correctly link it. Now if you see here, it's not linked correctly. That is, the customer ID from reputation is getting linked to the count. So you need to check this always that the link is correct, because if you do not perform the correct link, what happens is incorrect data gets connected. So always make sure you correctly check the link while you're connecting two transformations. So with this, you can go on to save your mapping, and every time you save it, that is by pressing Ctrl S, Informatica actually checks and validates your mapping. So as you can see here, now that I have saved it, it has completely checked my mapping and then it has declared that this mapping is loyal. So we've completed our mapping. Any doubts still here? Okay, so Deepthi is asking me what happens if we don't create a table into our database. So Deepthi, in that case, what happens is it processes the data, but finally when it's going to load this, that time your Informatica PowerCenter throws an error. So your workflow in turn fails. Now, don't worry about what workflow is, we'll be seeing that next. So for now, all you need to understand is that if you do not create a table into your database, then what happens is Informatica doesn't know where it needs to put this process data and it ends up failing. Does that answer your question, Deepthi? Okay, that's great. Alright, so now as I had mentioned earlier, your mapping in itself is not directly executable. Here what you've done basically is that you have defined how the data should be taken from the source, how it needs to be processed, and where it needs to be stored. But we need to actually process this. That is, we need to execute this mapping. To do that, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a workflow. Now, a workflow is something that is associated to a mapping which helps you executing in this mapping. Now, to create a workflow, we're going to use the second Informatica client tool, that is Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager. To do that, you have the option here, that is Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager. Now, all your Informatica PowerCenter tools have the option of the other client tools, which makes it easier for you to switch between them. So just click on the W icon here and automatically Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager gets launched. So this is your Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Manager. Similarly, like our PowerCenter Designer, there are mainly three workspaces here. For now, let's concentrate on Workflow Designer. Now in our Workflow Designer, let's begin by creating a new workflow. So to create a new workflow, click on Workflow tab and select Create option. Again, the naming convention here is that the name of the workflow will begin by WF followed by the name of the mapping that we have used. M_most loyal customers. Now don't change anything else, just click on OK and your workflow gets created. To understand that you have successfully created a workflow, you can see the start icon present here. Now it's time that we add our mapping to this workflow. To do that, what you need to do is that you need to add a task which is associated to our workflow. Now, there are multiple tasks in Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Designer. So you have a session task, you have a command task, you have email task, and then you have various options of decision, assignment, timer, control. So these are the different operations also available along with the three major tasks. For now, let's concentrate on the session task, which helps you associate to a mapping. So once you have selected the session task, just left click onto your workspace and then it asks you to which mapping should this session be associated. That is, which mapping should be executed when it's turn of this session to be executed. So we need to execute our first mapping, so click on OK and a session has been created. Now if you look at the name of the session as well, it again has a naming convention, that is S underscore the name of the mapping you have set. So these are some of the naming conventions you need to follow in Informatica PowerCenter. Now what we need to do finally is that we need to link the start to the session icon so that the execution of the workflow follows a sequence. So you basically have this option called link task present here. Once you've selected it, the start point has to be linked to the session. So any doubts still here? Okay, so Dave is asking me, can we execute multiple mappings? Do we have to create different sessions or can a single session be associated to multiple mappings? Okay, that's a very good question, Dave. Now, in a real-time scenario, you're not going to be working with a single mapping. You're going to be working with multiple mappings as such. In that case, what you need to do is that you need to create multiple sessions because each session can be associated to only one mapping. In such cases, you will have a complete workflow in a following structure where you would have a sequence of which mapping should be executed first and which should be executed later. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say you're working with multiple mappings where the output of your first mapping is going to be the input of your second mapping, and the input and the output of the second mapping is going to be the input for the third map. In such a case, what sequence would you follow for the sessions? Session associated with the first mapping comes first, session associated with the second mapping comes second, session associated with the third mapping comes third. Great. So, but let's say you have mappings 4 and 5 as well. Mapping 4 has its separate input and mapping 5 takes input from mapping 4. Then you have another mapping 6 which takes input from both mapping 3 and mapping 5. So in that case, you can create a branch where while you are executing workflow 1, 2 and 3, workflow 4 and 5 can be executed, and finally the output can be given to workflow 6. Okay, so again, it depends on your requirement. I definitely recommend that you try playing around with this, and it'll be a really fun experience for you guys as well. So any other doubts still here? Are you guys clear with this? Okay, that's great. Now before we go ahead and execute this workflow, there are certain things that you need to check with respect to the session properties. To do that, just double click on the session icon and go to the mappings tab here. Now here first what you need to do is that you need to check whether it is taking the data from valid sources, and then is it storing correspondingly to the valid output database as well. So let's say in case of a customer. Now customer was a flat file, so it is actually using a file reader. Now, one thing you need to remember is, let's say your flat file is not present in the default directory, it's present at a different location. In that case, what you need to do is that you see the option here that is source file directory under the properties tab. Here you need to specify the path to that file. So this is something you need to remember if your source file is not present in the default directory. So here you need to set the corresponding path. Now let's check for transactions table. It is using a relational reader here because it is reading from a database. Similarly, let's check for a target. Now for the target, I need to change the connection object because Oracle HR underscore SRC is to my source table, and I need to change it to Oracle HR underscore TGT. Once you click on it, let's check. Alright, it all seems okay, so just click on apply, click on OK, and let's go forward, save this workflow, that is by pressing Ctrl S, and similarly like we had seen with PowerCenter Designer, Workflow Manager as well checks if your workflow is valid or not. Once you've done that, it's time to go ahead and execute this workflow. To do that, you can either go to the workflow option and select Start Workflow, or you can just right click on your workspace and select Start Workflow from here. Now once you do this, the third phase of your solution comes into picture, that is Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Monitor. So Informatica PowerCenter Workflow Monitor is a client tool that helps you check the status of a workflow and helps you see whether there is any problem with the execution of it, or if the workflow has executed successfully. Now let's go ahead and execute this. Select Start Workflow option here. So again, click on Start Workflow, and you can see here Workflow Manager gets automatically launched. So if you look at this workspace here, this is the various workflow that you're executing as well as the details of the session. So I have only a single session, so it is showing me the status of the session. Now to get more details with respect to the same, you can double click it or right click and get Run Properties. So this will give you the complete details of your session properties. Now to get a better understanding, go to Source Target Statistics. Now here you can see my customer details had 10,000 rows, my transaction details had 50,000 rows, but my final output has only 344 rows. That is, from my 10,000 customers, I have identified 344 customers who have made more than 10 purchases from our retail organization. Now, let's say you want to verify this even further. Then what you can do is you can go to your database and check these details. So let's just do that. Go to the Oracle database. Let's say select star. from most loyal customers. I'll just execute this statement. And here you have the details of your customers. So customer ID, the name of the customer, details, everything that we want, along with the count. Now if you look at the count column, you can see that only customers who have purchased at least 10 or more products from our organization are present here. So with this we have solved our first use case and we have seen the different phases. So any doubts with respect to that same? Because from now onwards we'll try to speed up things a little bit so that you can see the various transformations as well as get an understanding with respect to how Informatica PowerCenter works. But any doubts with respect to each of the client tools that we have seen? Okay, that's great to see that you guys are following and clear with respect to that same. Now let's look at our second use case problem. What we need to do is that we need to identify the regions where we need to require more marketing. Next question, which data sets do we need to use? Do we need to use customer, product and transaction, or we just need product and customer, product and transaction, customer and transaction, or just transaction? Who can tell me? Okay, Henry tells me customer and transactions. Henry, can you tell me why? Just a simple justification. Okay, that's good enough effort. We need the details of the transaction to identify the customers from the region which has least number of sales. So again, what we're going to do is that we need to first identify the customer details, then we need to check the number of transactions made, and then we need to divide it region wise. So earlier we had grouped it based on customer ID. Here we'll try grouping it based on region. So any doubts till here? Okay, so let's go ahead and try it. So let's go back to our PowerCenter Designer and start creating a mapping for the second use case. Let me go on to create a new mapping. I'll call it marketing regions. So here again the steps are quite similar. We're going to load our transaction details. Then we'll connect it to an aggregator transformation. So these are shortcuts to your transformations. You can select anyone from here as well. So once you've selected it, just click on the workspace to add the new transformation. I'll select all this from my transaction table, load it to my aggregator. In my aggregator, I'll group it by customer ID so that I can understand which customer has bought which product. Now this makes it easier for me to identify the regions from where my customers come from. Now again, I'll add a new column that is count. Let me call it count and change the data type. I'll change it to decimal. It's not taking an input. So let's write the expression. Add in the customer ID. We'll validate it and click on OK. So any doubts with this step? We've done this before as well. I hope you guys are clear why we're doing this. So if I click on apply and OK, we've completed our aggregator transformation. Now similarly, let's add a filter transformation. Now in the filter transformation, earlier what we had done is that we had identified customers who had purchased more than 10 items from our organization. Now what we'll do is we'll identify low purchase customers. So what we'll do is we'll keep the threshold as 3. So any customer who has purchased 3 or less than 3 items, their region will try to market more and try to bring them aboard and make more transactions. So before I link the aggregator to the filter transformation, let's just modify this once more. Go to ports. We don't need invoice number, stock code, description. We need the customer ID. We don't need the product ID, and click on apply. Drag it and drop it to the filter transformation. Here in the filter transformation, we need to identify the customers who have purchased less than 3 items. So count. Let me add it from the ports tab, is less than equal to 3. You can validate it and it's done. So till here we have identified the customers who have purchased less than 3 items from our organization. Now it's time to identify from which region do they come from. So for that what we'll be doing is we'll bring in the customer table and again we'll create a join. So let's add a joiner transformation. to the join transformation comes all the customer details as well as details from the filter transformation. So here you have details of the customer and the details from the filter transformation. In conditions tab, let's add the condition. Customer ID from the filter table should be equal to the customer ID from my customer table. Click on apply. And in ports tab, let me just make sure that this doesn't go as an output. Apply. So till here what we've done is we've identified the details of the customers who basically have purchased 3 or less than 3 products from our organization. Now what we're going to do is, now we're going to group them based on their region, and then what we'll be doing is we'll try to identify those regions where we need to provide immediate marketing attention. So for that, again, I'll add another aggregator transformation. Here I'll take all the details present here. Now in my ports tab, what I'll do is I'll group them by city and country. So this will give me a better idea with respect to the regions where I need to concentrate more. Is that clear why we're grouping them based on their city and country? Okay, so I've got a confirmation from everyone. Good to see that you guys are following. Now here again, I don't need the details of the customer directly, so let me just uncheck all this option. I need the details of the city, the country. I don't need their contact number, email, and I need the count as well. So click on apply. Now here comes the question on how do you identify regions where I need to provide immediate marketing attention. Who can tell me the answer? That's correct, Dave. We need to identify the region with least number of customers. So for that, what you need to do is that you need to sort this data based on their count. And to sort this data, we're going to use a new transformation called sorter transformation, which will help us sort our data based on a specific value. So you have sorter transformation here. If you click on that, now we need city, country, and count alone. Drag it and drop it to the sorter transformation. And in the sorter transformation, if you go inside the ports tab, you need to identify the key option. Key option basically is the value based on which you're going to sort your data. So I select my count to be the key value, and it has to be in an ascending order. That is, the row which has least count number has to come first. The city and country which have the least count should come first before the others. So it will be sorted in an ascending order. Any doubts with respect to the sorter transformation? That's great to see. All of you understand this because it's a very simple transformation. And Informatica has made it quite easy for anyone to understand it as well, and how effective it is, you'll be seeing ahead. So finally what I need to do is I need all this data to come into my target table. So to do that, I'll again model my target table to meet the same requirements as a sorter transformation. So right click it and go to create an add target. Let's go back and modify this target definition. So let me first clear this. And let's modify our target definition. Here, let me show you a different kind of output file. Let's call it a flat file. Okay. Now I'm going to create a delimited flat file that is going to be a comma separated file. So just click on OK. I'll just rename this. So click on rename. Again TGT underscore marketing regions. So if you click on OK and then apply, we're done with this. Any doubts with respect to how to create a flat file as your output? Okay, since all of you seem clear, let's go back. Let's remove this target definition and update the target definition here. Finally, let's connect them and let's save this mapping. So you can see the mapping is valid. Now, rather than manually creating a workflow, for simple mappings like this, you can always use the automated process to create a workflow. Now how do you do that is you click on the workspace and select generate workflow from here. Now workflow with non-reusable session is what you need to go. So you can find the details here. Let's click on next. Just click on next and we are done. Now if you go inside your Informatica PowerCenter workflow manager, inside your workflow, you can find a new workflow created, that is WF_M_marketing region. Just open this and you have your session already created for your map. So let's just check the session properties. So the transaction details are read from our database and details of the customer are read from the flat file. Finally, when you're creating a target file to be a flat file, there are two things you need to do. First is go to properties here. Now in the properties tab, scroll down to find the header option. Here what you need to do is that you need to set the output field names to be headers. If you don't do this, there would not be any headers for your data. And the second thing you need to do is that you need to change the extension of the output file. Now by default, Informatica creates the output file to be a .out file. So we need to change it to a .csv. Once you've done that, just click on apply, OK, and save this workflow. So we are all set to go ahead and execute our workflow. So let's execute it. Right click, select start workflow, and in your workflow manager you can see the status. So it has successfully executed. To get the properties, just double click on it. So here you can see there are 2052 customers that you need to address who are in our low marketing region. Now here comes the question on where is the output file created. Now if you go back to your Informatica installation folder, in the same location, that is inside Informatica, your installation version, shared, info_shared, you have another folder called TGT files. Now if you open this, you can find your output file present here. Now again, this is the default location where Informatica creates its output files to be present. So just double click on it, and here you can find the city as well as the country with the corresponding count. So it's also been sorted into the required format so that you can get a good idea on where you need to start investing right away. So if you can see here, regions up to 3 have been considered as part of this data. So any doubts with respect to our second use case? So again, if you look at the numbers here, we've actually processed 60,000 rows and then brought it down to just 2052 rows. And all this data processing has happened in only 2 seconds. So again, this is something that you need to understand. How fast Informatica is processing such a huge amount of data and then giving you the result. So are you guys clear with respect to how we solved the second use case? Can we look at the third use case now? Can I get a quick confirmation in the chat box? Okay, so I've got a confirmation from Gauri, Santosh, Dave, Henry, Kripa, Deepthi. It's okay, it's great to see that you guys are following. Now let's go back and look at the third use case. In our third use case, we want to provide the customers with low number of purchases a special offer. So this is again quite similar to what we have actually done with respect to the second use case. Here what we're trying to do is that we're trying to identify the customers who made slow number of purchases. So again, what we can do here is that we can modify the same mapping that we have used to meet our requirement. So who can tell me what modifications we need to do? So you can look at the mapping here. Let me just sort it out. So this is your complete mapping. Another way to represent this mapping can be in iconic format, where just click on arrange all iconically, and this is your mapping arranged in iconic format. So what modifications do I need to do here? Who can tell me the answer to that? Okay, so Deepthi has got an answer here. Deepthi is like, we don't need the aggregator transformation or the sorter transformation. Who agrees with Deepthi? Before that, who can tell me what exactly were we doing in this aggregator transformation? Repeat, we are grouping them by city and country. So we don't need to do this to get the details of our low purchase customers. So what you can do is, we can remove these two transformations. So just select them and click on delete. And we also need to remove the target definition. So this target definition does not meet our requirement. So what we need to do is that we need to create a new target definition with all the details of the customers along with the count of products that they have purchased. Now by default, this in turn brings in customers who have purchased 3 products or less. So here what I'll do is I'll filter it a little more. So what I want is customers who have purchased less than 3 products, not just 3 products. So I'll modify it here, click on apply. Now this gives me customers who have purchased at least 1 product but not more than 2 products. Right click, select create an add table. Let's modify this, clear it from here. Let me just rename this. I'll call it low customers. Click on OK. Now, do you want me to write it to a database or create a flat file? Now, since I have only Oracle database presently on my system, I can either write it directly to my Oracle database or my flat file. Okay, so Dave has a question here. Dave is asking me which other database can I connect to my Informatica. Okay, Dave, there are a lot of our databases you can connect to. So you have your Teradata, you have your Sabase, you have your Informix, Microsoft SQL Server, you have IBM DB2 as well. So again, there are different kinds of databases that you can connect to. Apart from that, you can also connect to your Salesforce platform and import data from there as well. Now here what I'm doing is I'm going to create it as a flat file itself. And just to show you how to import from different sources, if you go to the sources tab, you can find here how you can import from PeopleSoft, TIBCO repositories. Now I have disabled TIBCO repository option here. Apart from that, you can import from various web service providers. You have Power Exchange, Salesforce.com. So again, there are different sources from which you can import your data from and work with in Informatica PowerCenter. Come back to our mapping designer workspace. Let me just remove this. Bring in the updated target definition and connect it to my mapping. Finally, let's save this. And now what you need to do is let's go back to our workflow. Now here we made a modification to our mapping. Now, do you think we can directly go on and execute our workflow to get the output? Correct. The correct answer to this is no. We need to also ensure that the changes that are made in the mapping gets reflected here as well. Now to do that, what you can do is that you can select the session to which the mapping is associated, right click it and select refresh mapping. When you do this, you see the yellow icon present here. This means that there has been changes made to this mapping. So just go ahead and save it and you can see the icon changes. Again, let's just check the properties, go to mapping. Let me check the output details. Again, needs header and I need to change the output file extension. Save it and let's execute this and see. Now you can see it's executing in my workflow manager and it has successfully executed. Now earlier there were 2252 rows, now there's 1176. This is mainly because I have not considered customers who have bought 3 products from my website. Let me just show you the output file. So these are my customers who have purchased low products from my website. Now what I need to do is I need to create a marketing campaign which will bring them back to my website for better offers. So are you guys clear with this? Any doubts with respect to that? Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll check out the fourth use case. Now in the fourth use case, what we need to do is that we need to identify the most selling category of products. Now for this, we also need to include our product details table. But should we include our customer details? No, we don't need to include our customer details. Now let's go back. I'll begin by creating a new mapping. Most selling category. If you click on OK. Now let's go back to our source analyzer workspace. I'll clear all this and let's load our details of product. So again, I'll import it from a file. Change file type to all files. I have product.csv and finish it. Now coming back to my mapping. First thing again, to identify the most selling product. Which table should I use first? Transaction or product? Correct, Kripa, we need to use transaction table first. So let me load my transaction table. Who can tell me the next step? What do you think I need to do to identify my most selling category? So in my transaction table, I have invoice number, stock code, description, quantity, invoice date, unit price, customer ID and product ID as well. So what should I do here? Okay, so Deepthi is telling me I need to group them by product ID. How many of you agree with that? Okay, so since most of you consider that as an option to be used, let me put it this way as well. What if we bring in the details of the product and then group them by the category? In that case, what do we do? Which do you feel is more suitable? Category grouping, right? Great. So now what I'll do is I'll bring in the details of the product as well, drag it and drop it. And then from here, I'm going to use a joiner transformation. In the joiner transformation, I'll bring in all the details from the transaction table as well as details from the product table. The condition based on which it's going to be joined is going to be the product ID. And now from here, I don't need the following ports. Product price is not needed, seller. The department is needed. Department here basically refers to the category from which it belongs to. So that's about all we need. So click on apply and you can see we have joined these two tables. Now what we need to do is we need to connect it to an aggregator transformation. And in the aggregator transformation, let's bring in the product ID and the product department. I'll drag it and drop it to the aggregator transformation. Here, I'll group them by department. Also what I'll do is I'll add a new column that will keep the count. Now let me add the expression for count. It's going to count the number of times the department ID comes in. So count department, let's validate it. Click on OK, click on apply, and this. So with this we get the count as well. But what do we need? We need to identify the top selling categories. In our case, what we'll do is we'll try to identify the top 3 selling categories. So for that, what we're going to do is we're going to add a new transformation which will help us sort this. So we have used this earlier, which is the transformation. Yes, it's the sorter transformation. So bring in the sorter transformation. Let me bring all these 3. In the sorter, we're going to select count to be the key, and instead of ascending, we're going to use descending here. So all this done, I have all the rows sorted in a descending order, but I need to still identify the top 3 selling categories. For that, what you're going to do is you're going to use a rank transformation. Now a rank transformation helps you select a certain range of rows from either top or from the bottom of that table. So let's go to transformations, create rank transformation, select all and drop. Now in the rank transformation, we need to specify we need the top 3. So here you have option to select from the top or from bottom. So we need from top, we need 3. Click on apply. And finally, it's time we create our target definition. Before that, let me just arrange all this. So now let's create a target definition. Rank transformation, create an add target. Let's just modify this. Top categories. So I'll create it as a flat file. Click on apply. Let me remove the existing target definition. And let me connect it. So our mapping is valid. Let's create a workflow. And let's go back to our workflow manager. So here let's disconnect and let's reconnect. So you have your most selling categories. If you open it, let's modify session properties. Same thing as earlier, add the header and change the extension file. Save it and let's execute this workflow. So here, if you see the properties, from 3000 rows that were there in my product table and 50,000 in my transaction, I have got top 3 selling categories. So let's see the output. So these are my top 3 selling categories. So any doubt with respect to the same? So let's look at our last use case. So here what you need to do is you need to understand the requirement of the customer region wise. So what we need to do here, any cases, it's quite simple guys, we worked around with this. So again, you need the transaction details, you need details of the customer, and then what we'll do is city wise what we'll try to understand is what exactly is their requirement. So that way we'll get a good idea with respect to that same. So let's go back to our PowerCenter Designer and I'll create the final mapping. So let me create a new mapping. I'll call it m_region requirement. Customer. So here let's bring in the transaction details. Let's bring in the customer details. Let's just join them. The joining condition would be customer ID equal to customer ID. So just click on apply. Now, one thing we do not need is that we don't need the invoice number nor the product ID. So we don't need the customer's name. We don't need his address. We need his city and country, and we don't need the contact details. So apply. So let's create an aggregator transformation. We need the customer ID, their city, country, drag it and drop it to the aggregator transformation. In our aggregator transformation, what we'll be doing is we'll be grouping it based on city. One thing, let me add in the product ID as well, so that way in case of future, if you want to know the details of the product as well, so we can include that as well. So product ID as well, I'll be including here. So from this, I'll create my target definition. Let's modify it finally. Clear this. TGT, region, customer requirement. Click on apply. And I'll create this also as a flat file because it's easier for me to view it. Save this. And you can see it's showing as invalid because it is not linked. So let me remove this. Let me bring in the new target definition. If connected, now if you save it, you can see it is showing it as valid. So finally, let me create a workflow. Let me go back to the workflow manager. Here, let me disconnect and reconnect. So once I've connected, let me just open it. Open this. So we have a workflow created. Go inside. In mapping, target definition needs to be updated. .csv. So click on apply, save it, and let's execute it. So you can see here it has successfully executed. If you see properties, we have 3321 rows present in our target definition. So let's see that. So these are the product requirements in the following regions. So any doubts with respect to this example? So we've talked about 5 different use cases. Let's recap them. So first case, we saw how to identify the most loyal customers so that we can provide them with additional discount. Second case, we saw how to identify the various regions which require more marketing. Third case, we saw how to provide customers with low number of purchases for a special offer. And then we saw how to identify most selling category of products. And finally, we saw how to understand the requirements of a customer region-wise. So any doubt with respect to the use case that we have discussed? Alright, great. So now that I've got a confirmation from everyone, let's move on to the Informatica architecture. So now that you've seen the different Informatica PowerCenter tools, it's time we look at Informatica PowerCenter's architecture to understand how these tools fit in together. So we have the Informatica PowerCenter client tools, which we've already seen. You have the Repository Manager, the PowerCenter Designer, PowerCenter Workflow Manager, and PowerCenter Workflow Monitor. So you know what each one of them does. Now all these are directly linked to each of the corresponding service. Now as we've discussed, the integration service is the major service that helps you in transferring the data from the source to the target destination. Apart from that, you have the repository service. As we had mentioned earlier, repository service is the service that maintains your repository as well as stores all the data that you'll be creating into the repository database. Then you have the Informatica domain. Now this is something that you will be seeing mainly in your organization, where you have a single Informatica server and various Informatica nodes connected to it. Now, when you talk about this, in an organization, you will have the Informatica PowerCenter client tools installed on your system, and one main system will have the Informatica PowerCenter server tools installed on it. So there you mainly have Informatica PowerCenter admin console that would be working around. Now, so let me show you how the admin console looks like. So let me go ahead and show you the administrative console. So this is the administrative login page. So this is what your administrative console looks like. So this is how your administrative console would look like after you've logged into it. Now, usually in an organization, most people who are working on the administrative side will be having access to this. So not everyone may get an access to work on this. But since I have configured both my server and client on the same system, I have the direct access to it. Now, since I have just a single node, there's just a node detail present here inside my domain, and same with my licensing management. Now, apart from this domain, you can also see the various connections that you have specified. Now, since again, as I've mentioned, it's all on my same system. But in case of a server client configuration as in organizations, then you would have the complete connection specified here. Okay. So again, with respect to both my services, now let's say at one point, what happens is my integration service faces some challenge. So this is the place you can come to and then restart your integration service and work around with it. So it definitely is something that helps you out with respect to that same. Now, apart from this, you have the logs tab. Now, log basically is used to keep track of what every person is doing as to what message is being shared or what operation that you're performing, who is performing which operation. So all that can be configured here. Now, it can be in my domain, it can be with respect to a service, any user's activity, or even the log aggregate can be used to aggregate the log. Now, apart from that, monitoring helps you to check as to what each person is specifically doing as part of your domain. Now again, these are mainly used by administrators, as you may have figured out by now, so you don't have to worry much about it as of now. Now, reports again is something that you'll definitely be using for creating different kinds of license management reports, web services reports, and so forth. Now, one thing is, if you are configuring your Informatica PowerCenter for a web-based service, then you can find the details present here. It can be even Informatica Cloud, it can be Salesforce Cloud, and so forth. Now, the final tab that we'll be discussing about is the security tab. Now here, the major use of the security tab for an administrator is to assign privileges to each of the users as per their needs. Now, a team member may have only access to the client tools, but a team leader could also have access to the repository manager, based on which he'll be able to manage and process it. Now again, all that is actually defined in the security tab, and we'll be seeing how to do that in our next session. So are you guys clear with respect to how the administrative console looks like? Any doubts with respect to that? I hope you've got a simple understanding as to how it works. Now, you would have all definitely worked with the administrative console when you were trying to install Informatica on your system. And if you've not installed Informatica, then we also have a session for that upcoming this weekend. So now that we've seen Informatica PowerCenter admin console, I hope you guys have understood the Informatica PowerCenter architecture. Can you give me a quick confirmation in the chat box? Okay, so I've got a confirmation from Santosh, Deepthi, Gauri, Dave, Kripa. That's great to see, guys. So let's talk about the final stage, that is data visualization. Now in data visualization, it's a quite simple process. You have your data and you need to convert it to a visual graphics. Again, we've talked about how important data visualization is. Now there are different ways through which a data can be visualized. It could be in terms of a graph, it could be a plot, it could be a geographical map, it could be a heat map. So again, you have a lot of data visualization tools using which you can perform data visualization. So we'll not go into data visualization as part of this session, but we'll be talking about it in our next session, where the data that we have processed will directly be loading into Tableau, and I'll be showing you to work around the visuals. So with that, we come to a conclusion of today's session. And to summarize what we've learned today, we started talking about what do business needs and how exactly business insights plays an important role. Then we moved on to talk about business intelligence and how it helps you achieve these insights. From there, we talked about ETL, which is a process which helps you achieve business intelligence. And then we talked about Informatica PowerCenter architecture, problem statement and its solution phases. And then we even moved on to see Informatica PowerCenter client tools. So any questions with respect to today's session, anything that you guys are not clear with, or you want me to repeat? Alright, so I've got a confirmation from everyone. That's great to see. So hope you guys have a great weekend and see you for the next session. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply to them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to our Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!